July 14th Public Works Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
Chairman Weggie,
Here.
Alderwoman Tice,
Here.
Alderman Gould,
Here.
Alderman Shelton.
Here.
All members are present.
Great, we'll move into approval of the agenda. Any changes, comments? I assume we can approve by acclamation. Moving to citizen comments. Now is your opportunity if you would like to address the board with any topic, and we have another opportunity at the end of the meeting as well, if anybody would like to speak. All right, seeing none, it's going great. We'll move in the report of the committee chairs and aldermen. I'll go first. I just want to thank Bola and Dan and the two chiefs for their flexibility. We had some good conversations this week about a temporary speed bump on Eulalie, and I think we have a good place to put that. That will be temporary, and that will be installed next week. And then once Manchester reopens, we will take it up and repair the road underneath it. So I just want to thank everybody for their willingness to work with us on that. I think that's important. And that's all I have. Nancy.
Sorry, no report.
Okay. Jeff?
No report?
Jack?
No report.
Okay, great. Moving the city administrator report, nothing there. Moving to department reports, so Public Works. So Dan, you're up.
I have a few updates here. So regarding the MSD sewer improvements at Rosalie White Bridgeport, I know Fred Luth, they're finishing up over on Rosalie. They may even be finished today. I know the goal was to finish this week, and then they'll jump up to Bridgeport. The stuff over on White's done with the exception of restoration. So assuming Bridgeport goes well, they should be out there restoring all the pavement around August. So that's good news. And then the street lights on Rosalie, we actually had a couple internal meetings. I know that Planning and Development did the inspection, sent the wiring inspection report to Ameren. Ameren says it takes 7 to 10 business days for construction to go out there and put the meter, which would put us not next week, but the week after. So assuming that they're good to their schedule, that the meter will be installed and then all of those lights will be operational from basically, you know, the post office heading east up to Mary.
Okay, so it's totally in Ameren's court now.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
And then you just mentioned the temporary speed cushions, so I won't even talk about that unless you have any questions on it. And I'll be bringing the full-blown reports for lawn and for other areas to the public safety. So, and then the FY22 street RFP, we've got the edits on it, and we'll get that posted next week. So we'll advertise for about 3 weeks, and then we'll collect bids and bring them back to this committee at the August meeting. And then assuming that we have multiple bids and can get a favorable approval, we'll take it to the next board meeting there in August. And then last thing I had, which had a little bit of information on, this came across at the last minute, but Ameren Overhead Electric Service at 1931 St. Clair, the resident had called and asked if Ameren could move that pole. There's a wooden utility pole with a Cobra head on it. They looked at it, and there's these 3 options. They're all fairly expensive, but the situation that there is now is that the existing pole's on the south side of their driveway, which is near St. Clair and Lawn, on the west side of St. Clair, but it's almost it is tangent to the south side of the driveway. So I put a little snippet, you know, from Google Earth and showed like that red line between the houses. So between 1931 and 1935, there's an overhead service that runs between those homes that then connects to that pole near 1931's driveway. Then it runs due north up to the pole at the dead end of St. Clair. So that's the power supply source for both of those lights. If we were to scoot the pole further south away from their driveway, it changes the angle on the overhead service and puts it too close to the neighboring house. Ameren said you have to maintain 5 feet of horizontal separation between the service and the face of the structure. So that's why you see those options there. I don't know if you know, the committee would entertain any of these. I mean, the only other option I thought that I didn't put on the list was if the person were to realign their driveway. You know, if they scooted the apron further north, it would have like a slight curve to it, but that would at least get you further away from the pole. But you know, that would be at their expense. These other ones, Ameren said, would be at our expense.
All right, any questions for Dan? Yeah, Jeff.
I mean, I'm sympathetic of it. I think, I have a driveway, I have one that's usable. The other one is existing, and it's right next to the pole, and so everybody has to be real careful when they're coming out. I guess the question I have is I have one, this location has one. How many adjacency poles do we have around the city? And I'm concerned about setting a precedent and saying, okay, well, let's go ahead and move this one. And then somebody else says, well, that's great. I want mine moved too. And now all of a sudden we're spending a lot of money moving infrastructure that's been there for a long time. So I'm just kind of curious on if we have the precedence of doing this before, and if we need to investigate, what are we getting ourselves into if we start to open up and approve some of this type of thing?
Yeah, I didn't have any precedent to go by, and I asked staff, and they didn't either. The only way I would maybe set a precedent is if there's accidents, the pole's too close to the roadway and people keep hitting it or something if they're going parallel. But this is just an individual's driveway that's adjacent to it. It is in, the pole's in our right of way, it's in the city's property, but Ameren won't move it without being paid.
And it's not that it's not that this pole was just installed or anything
No.
like that. It's been like this for,
They've lived there 14 years, and it's been there as long as they've lived there, and the pole's probably even older than that. Ameren could probably pinpoint a date on it, but
And
it
that-
does have a street light on it that we pay for, the city pays for.
right. And that tree that's, I'm looking at a street view now, that wasn't necessarily included in the packet, but that tree that's next to there looks like a fairly new tree. Did we recently plant that tree? And
A
that-
few
would
years
that-
ago,
Yeah.
the other one, I believe, died.
So that one would be, would be removing that tree, which is a
Correct.
cost then to put a new tree somewhere else to replace the
Yes.
tree. Okay,
Yeah, and that's what Ameren said too. Their price, of course, wouldn't include tree removal and replacement. That would be on us. And I was like, well, then that means the cost is that much more.
okay, thank you.
Nancy?
Yeah, so I've noticed that Ameren's been coming through and replacing a lot of the telephone poles. Is this a pole that is up for Ameren to replace, and could it be fixed at that point when Ameren's already doing it and it's their dime?
They didn't indicate that it was ready to be replaced yet, but I can ask that question. Because that
They
would.
seem to be
yeah.
just a little over from where they originally were when they put a new one in.
Yeah, typically they'll be a few feet away from the other one. The other option would be to feed it from the north, from the Brentwood forest side, and then basically reverse direction on that current, but still going to be at a cost.
Yeah, Jack?
I agree with Jeff. I'm sympathetic to the situation, but also I feel like we're opening a can of worms. So, but I like Nancy's idea if that Ameren has some feedback of, it's not going to be replaced for another 30 years. Maybe we can have the discussion again.
All right, any other comments about St. Clair or questions? Doesn't sound like anybody wants to make a motion or anything to do anything. I have one more question for you, Dan. The chain on white, our temporary egress blocker, with white being finished, is there a reason we need to keep that? I've had some residents talk about how it's kind of hard to get a bike underneath there.
Yeah, we had kept it up just so
Right.
we didn't want anybody shortcutting through there. And I thought, well, once the road's restored, then that can be removed. Because I know that Fred Luth is going to need that to get paving trucks circulated through the neighborhood. But I didn't want to just take it down now because I'm like, well, then it's probably inviting
Right.
them to start using it again. This seems to squash that problem with people using it at all times.
It does. I mean, do we want to put a more, like the big Lego brick back there or something instead? I mean, if we don't think the fire is going to need that.
Right. Yeah, I can discuss it with the fire and police, see if that's an issue for them. Because that was the other reason for the chain
Right.
was fire could easily snip the chain and go right through there with no issue.
Yeah, I appreciate if you could kind of
Yeah.
think about that.
We'll ask.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dan?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, Jack.
This is, and I can touch base with you offline. The LED lights that are installed on some of the telephone poles in Brentwood Forest, is that Ameren, are those Ameren lights or are those ones that we just added on to their pole? Do you know off the top of your head? Or is it-
If they're Cobra heads, they're Amerens. If they're the black fiberglass, they would be ours. I mean, we had them installed, Ameren powers
Right.
them, and it's Ameren's power pole and Ameren's light.
Okay. We have a couple there. I'll touch base with you offline. I was just
Yeah,
curious.
just show me where they are and we'll
Okay,
take a look at them.
thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Dan. We'll go into Parks and Rec. Eric?
Good evening. Two really quick things. One that was in the report, which talked about trying to set up a special meeting of Public Works to go over the destination playground bid results. It looks like August 2nd seems to be the date that works best for everyone. So I think as long as everyone agrees to that, Kelly will send out something for you guys probably tomorrow. And then secondarily, Eager Road, the end of Eager Road, we talked about that last month. I just want to give a quick update. We are moving forward with the vacation, but when we did the work previously, or late last year, we did not do a boundary survey, which is what we need to do the vacation with St. Louis County. So we need to do the boundary survey, the vacation plat, and record it with St. Louis County. So TWM, I talked to them today, said they could do that. The cost is pretty minimal, it's $3,000. So I would recommend we move forward with TWM to do that, and then I'd have that vacation done in August, at the board meeting in August.
You need a motion for that, Eric, or was the 3,000 within the?
I think it's a little bit
Purchasing
over, I'm not sure. I can't see BOLA right now. $2,500, I think, is BOLA's limit.
All right.
So I think you guys need to make that motion.
I have a quick question, Eric. I just walked by there today, and so that house just sold just to the north, and they have some stakes up. Is there any possibility that that could help us at all if we reached out to them and said, do you have any sort of report of any sort?
I can try.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm more happy to do that.
okay. So can we make a motion, or can I make a motion that Eric move forward with that after following up with that resident on the Chafford Woods?
Second.
All right, we got a motion by Jack, second by Jeff. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay,
Good, thank you.
great, thanks, Eric. All right, planning and development, I don't think we have anything there. SUSCOM, I don't think we have anything there.
No
We have a
update.
meeting. All right, we'll move into the consent agenda. The only thing we have on there are our meeting minutes.
Motion to approve consent agenda?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. Aye. All right, we'll move into old business. First up, we have the Evans Howard Monument selection. So
We are still waiting for a response from Site Center. It's going through their legal review. And so once we have that, then we will be able to bring it here for approval and then to the Board of Aldermen. And I believe Dan has an update on bids for the monument.
Yeah, I solicited from 3 different vendors. I know we talked about doing like a turnkey operation. I do have 2 of them, which is in that memo. So it's N-Graphics at $13,682 and Fast Signs at $20,542. So it's apples to apples. They would do the concrete base, the brick pillars, the metal sign, everything. So N-Graphics is the lower cost option. And I'm assuming that we'd still want to pursue doing that this year.
yeah, Jeff?
I definitely think we need to pursue doing that this year. And I think last time we talked, there was some conversation about would Public Works take on maybe doing the flat work while they do, the other stuff? Is that just too complicated for such a kind of a
It's-
small job
right, and
to worry
we're,
about?
Trying to get
And the
other
cost
things
savings.
done, yeah.
Cost savings not that great.
Correct.
And then I had a question regarding the GoFundMe, and is that still open? I know when we did the ordinance to be able to allow to accept it, I don't think we put a dollar amount yet, because in case other things come
Right.
in.
I just looked at Alderman Lockmiller, and he said it's still open.
Okay. I wouldn't, what I would recommend is that we move forward with, I'll make a motion, I guess, move forward with taking this to the Board of Aldermen for approval. But I'd also make a recommendation to maybe at Brentwood Days to have some advertisement that this is still available, and if anybody in the community wanted to contribute to it, just reduces the cost of the burdens on the city from taxpayer perspective as well. So,
I'm sure we can do that.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion? Okay, I guess all in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Okay, great. I'm excited about that, too. All right, next item is the pedestrian bridge replacement in Memorial Park. Old Rusty, we call it.
All right, so I gave you a little bit of a sneak peek of this last month, and just to kind of give you a brief breakdown, when we did the budget last year, we got a quote from a couple people about the bridge replacement in Memorial Park. We got $90,000 as our, actually it's about 85, and I padded it just a little. And then when we did the engineer's estimate, I think it came back about 115,000, and that was in January, so it jumped from 90 to 115 in those couple months. Well, our low bid from the 2 bids we received was $207,000. I don't know if you know, that's a little bit more than what I had budgeted for. So there's a couple things we can do. Actually, I mean, first of all, I did talk to Horner and Schifrin, and they did think that it was a little bit higher than anticipated, but they don't keep a good track of the kind of the bidding time right now. And so I also just talked to Navigate and said, hey, what do you guys think of this? And they said, besides mobilization, they thought everything was kind of in line with today's bidding environment. So steel's really high, concrete is really high right now. So those are a couple things we're kind of up against. So Gershenson, who is a low bidder, is well known. Both Navigate and Horner Schifrin said that they're a good company. They said typically they don't think they'd bid on this because it's really small for them. So maybe they just don't have a lot going on. So if we want to move forward with that, you know, we would ask for to move forward with the Gershman as a low bid with an 8% contingency, which is $16,000. So how we do that, we saved a little bit of money on the Brentwood Storm Sewer Complex, or Brentwood Sports Complex Storm Sewer and Creek Bake Project, and that leaves about $33,000 unfunded. We'd have to be able to pick that up throughout the budget, and I feel fairly confident we could do that. I'm not too worried about that. At the very least, we budgeted about $150,000 net bottom line profit, so it just eat into some of our profit if we need to do that. The other option is that within the time of getting the bids and talking is the other bridge across from Memorial Park is also probably coming to its end of its useful life. We're hoping we get a couple more years out of that bridge, but we feel like we probably should put it in the budget for next year. So if we do that, we could package both the bridges together. We might get some cost savings based on the fact that there's only one mobilization instead of 2 mobilizations, and you know, bring out the same equipment for both those projects. So we feel like we might be able to save a little bit of money. Hopefully the bidding environment will go down a little bit too, and we'll see some of those prices that are astronomical come down some. There's no guarantee that will happen, so that's a risk. So that's why I'm kind of basically throwing out there is what you guys think would be best. We could do either.
Are there any safety concerns if we do delay this for another year?
No, I talked to my park superintendent. He's comfortable with where the bridges are at. He really wants to get them replaced next year, which means we probably think it's about a 2 or 3 year where we get into real trouble. We don't like to get to that last moment, obviously, with bridges. So we feel comfortable. We actually added some more wood on the bridges this year, just kind of shore them up a little bit more, and we feel confident that it's in good shape right now.
All right. Anyone want to make a motion of a direction to go?
Well, I mean, I think that, yeah, Nancy can chime in. Actually, I'll let Nancy talk.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy. Sorry, I didn't see you.
So I think this is kind of a hard situation because it's so much more than we budgeted. But I think having gone through this with the paving on the concrete we were doing, that I'm wondering if we should push it off to next year, try to do both bridges at the same time, and then see if there's any value in trying to solicit bids with a more open process. So rather than confining, you know, we want it done on a certain date to spread the time out. I know it's not as convenient with parks because people want to go to the parks, but if it saves substantial money, then that might be something that the citizens will be, you know, willing to live with.
Yeah, one of the good things.
Taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, one of the good things to add to that is if we did that, one of the ideas that my staff and I came with was to kind of bid it in November if we have everything ready to go, so that in December, January, when construction companies are pretty light, they'd have this project ready to roll. So But we could add that extra time on as well, so if they want to wait until the end of '23, we could give them that option as well.
If that's a motion, I'll
Yeah, it
second
sounded
it.
like a motion.
Okay, yeah, that was a motion.
Anybody want
What-
to second that?
I
That
did
sounded like a
second it.
second, yeah, okay. All right, we got a motion and a second. Any other discussion, comments? Was the motion clear there, Eric?
No.
Okay. I
No.
think I'll paraphrase the motion. The motion is to hold until 2023 and repackage the process for both bridges to see if we can get a bit more cost saving and to leave the finish date a little more open. Allow maximum
That
flexibility.
was exactly what I said.
Right, nice job.
Thank
All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great.
One more quick thing is, because we need to move forward with the other bridge, we need to get the engineers' drawings for that secondary bridge. I left Horner Schiffer, who's our on-call. They did the other bridge. They gave us a price of $43,200. I now have $90,000 of savings, so I could utilize some of that to pay for that if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, do you need a motion on that as well?
Yeah,
So-
since it's,
Yeah, it's expensive. Is that in line with what I
Yeah.
mean, basically, that's not an increase from
yeah.
design costs, yeah?
In fact, it's only, I think, 5,000 more than what we paid for the other bridge
big-
design, and this is actually a larger span, so there's going to be a little bit more work.
And I would also recommend that they do some, use some of the similar design elements, and maybe there's some savings there.
Yep. Exactly.
So that they look uniform.
Yep.
Okay, I'll make that motion that we proceed with getting the design for the Black Creek Bridge, or, no, which bridge?
Yeah, it is the pedestrian bridge over Black.
Pedestrian bridge over Black Creek.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
All right,
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. All right, the moment we've all been waiting for, although it might sound boring on the surface, this is really exciting, really. So the Stormwater Master Plan. So I don't know if, Tony, if you're up on this?
Alrighty, first of all, I want to introduce myself. My name's Tony Schenk with Gonzalez Companies, and we've been working on this stormwater master plan for the city since about September of last year, whenever we were granted approval to proceed. So tonight, what I plan to do is we've got a draft report that we completed a few weeks ago, and we presented it to the city. And tonight, I'm going to go over a few different things about how that report was developed, and then also give a quick summary of the findings. It's a pretty large report. There was a lot of work that went into it. I was the project manager throughout. I was very involved in all the pieces. But if someone from the audience might ask me a specific question, I might not have the answer in front of me, but it's probably in the report, hopefully. So if everybody could bear with me, I'll just kind of go through the report and kind of explain how we got to where we're at tonight. So the very first step of the project was to first identify the problem areas. Then we're gonna go through some data collection, have ordinance reviews and recommendations. That's kind of separate from the stormwater master plan in the sense that where are the problem areas at and how do we fix those? But maybe there's some regulatory things that we need to be thinking about as well to help improve as we move forwards. And then we also went through a drainage analysis for a number of specific sites, and we've developed preliminary design recommendations on how to fix the issues that we found throughout the data collection phase. We did construction cost estimating, and we did a priority ranking, and I'm gonna go into the details of that as well. And then we compiled all that data into a report. So the first step in the process, as I said, was to do this identification of the problem areas, okay? We didn't just start analyzing every culvert in the city and determining, is this sufficient or not, right? So the very first step was we had to get some public input. Where are the problems at? Who's having the issues? And so the way that we were able to do this was, with the help of city staff, we advertised this stormwater questionnaire, which said, do you have a problem and how bad is it? And give us some information about it. And so we had the stormwater questionnaire from about, it was available online from about October of 2021 through the end of the year, okay? Besides the stormwater questionnaire, we also held 2 public meetings, which we advertised through a number of different platforms, and we held those in November of last year. Through the stormwater questionnaire and those public meetings, we obtained about 99 complaints throughout that. Those 99 complaints added with a list that the Public Works Department had accrued over a number of years through ongoing maintenance issues and other items that they've noted these addresses. We compiled all of that information together, and we ended up with 213 different addresses, with some of them varying degrees of information. Some of the information that we got was just what we've seen on the survey, and some of the information was just an address because the city knew that they had to go back to that spot to remove ice at the end of, during the winter time, right? Or some other sorts of ongoing maintenance issues. So the next step that we went into was to really determine what is the problem in these areas, and we did that through our data collection phase, okay? So our data collection phase, we went through a couple of different steps. First, we had a desktop survey where we analyzed data from various sources, MSD, LiDAR information, topographic maps, flood maps, etc. And we also went back to the public, right? And so those people that had given us surveys and gave us information, a number of them that we didn't have enough information, we went back and reached out to these folks. We met people at their homes. We investigated all 213 of these locations. And so we also completed field investigations where we physically opened up manholes, looked in size, determined pipe sizes, and drainage characteristics, etc. So we looked at all 213 of these locations, and we compiled a preliminary investigation report. That preliminary investigation report was presented to city staff sometime in mid-February or so. And from that preliminary investigation report, we determined to do a more detailed analysis, both hydraulically, cost estimating, priority ranking, and for 42 of the 213 sites. Now, I know what you're all thinking. How can you discount that many sites, right? Well, we didn't discount the sites. We didn't discount any of the sites here, okay? What we did was we found that a lot of the sites had complaints in clusters. This neighbor had the same concern as this neighbor, as this neighbor, as this neighbor, and so we were able to combine 4 or 5 or 6 locations into a single study area. A number of other locations had issues that we considered just maintenance concerns whenever through our preliminary investigation. A maintenance concern would be something like a clogged inlet, or maybe a piece of broken curb that was holding water in the curb and gutter and creating this icing condition. We don't need to do a hydraulic investigation to fix those items, so we've put those on a separate list, and we've not discounted them, but have not included them into our report. And so once we got through all of those, we got these 42 different sites. We went ahead and we started doing our detailed investigation. As we were getting through this detailed investigation, it should be noted that right at the end of May, this is a long process for us. There was a lot of different properties, 213 properties to look for. There was still a good number that we didn't find any information on during our field investigations. We didn't have any input from the residents previously. Attempts to make contact with them in field didn't produce anything. And so during late May, we submitted registered letters to these outstanding locations. We got about 25 responses from all of the registered letters that we sent out. A number of the responses were in line with the findings of another, of one of the 42, right? So it was a nearby issue that this person was also complaining, but there was a few, probably, I think it was about 12 different sites that had new issues that weren't brought to light until we were all the way into May, June, right here at the beginning of July, where we're still getting these comments in. So I would like to mention that there are those 25, not 25, about 12 additional sites that were not investigated with this comprehensive, the intent was to have a comprehensive report. Okay, so I'll get back to the sites and the specifics of how the report was developed, and kind of wanted to go into kind of a side shoot here on the ordinance review and recommendations. So this, we've provided a very detailed report of our review of the recommendations in the report. I just wanted to kind of point out a couple of things here tonight. The sections that we reviewed are sections 400 and 500. Those are your sections that control the stormwater discharges here in the city. So again, we've got a lot of words on the screen. I'm not going to bore everybody with reading every single recommendation, but section 400 again is for the stormwater management, grading, and erosion control. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up was that while the city has a really good ordinance in regards to stormwater conveyance underground, because you actually have an ordinance that is more stringent than the standard of the industry, MSD, you don't have an ordinance that controls overland flows. And so what happens is we get these very large storm events that the pipe capacity is exceeded, and so now the stormwater looks for an overland flow route. And what we've found throughout the preparation of this report is those overland flow routes are not available. And so because they're not available, where does that stormwater go? It goes into people's garages and homes and causes the damage. And so, one of our recommendations in the report is to develop an ordinance that makes, these overland flow routes, a requirement, and it's something that people should be looking for. The other ordinance that we reviewed was in regards to the stormwater infill development, that section. For those of you that don't know, I personally do all of the stormwater infill development permit reviews, and I look for things like overland flow routes, and I suggest them during the development of these new things, but there's no control for me to say you have to do that. I always say it's noted that there's these ditches between the houses that are going to convey this water, but there's no mechanism for me to require that. So again, I think that was an important ordinance. And so reviewing the stormwater infill development permit ordinance, I noticed that there were several sections that included procedural type things. And these procedural type things, while in the ordinance seem like they would work great, the procedural things that's in the ordinance and what's actually being conducted don't coincide, okay? During late October, around October of last year, myself and city staff, we tried to streamline the process of these stormwater infill development permits, because what we were having is every single applicant had to resubmit and resubmit and resubmit, and it was a hindrance upon not only the developers but upon city staff, and so we felt like it was important for us to streamline this process. We put together a flow chart. I don't know if the flow chart ever made it onto the streets or if it was lost in the presentation that I gave back in October, but we've got a process here, and part of that process is, when is a stormwater infill development permit required? The definition says that whenever the Architectural Review Board reviews it and it's determined that 200 square feet of impervious is happening because of this development, then it comes to the stormwater infill development permit section, or the planning and development folks. That's not what happens anymore. We've bypassed that step. There's not a reason to get the Architectural Review Board involved. We're, like I said, we're trying to streamline the process, and so that definition is wrong. Other things that we found are that some of the fees are insufficient or inconsistent. So right now in the ordinance, it says that you should supply a deposit that is equal to the cost of implementing your stormwater best management practice. Well, on the MyGov website, it's calculated for you by multiplying 110% of your impervious area. So it's just, they don't match, and I think that those things could be improved. So again, there's more information in the full report, but I wanted to kind of bring out just a couple of important pieces that I picked out here tonight. So back to the preliminary analysis of our comprehensive map, this is I'm going to call this the meat and potatoes of the Stormwater Master Plan, the drainage analysis and the preliminary design. This is where we spent a large amount of the time going through each one of these different sites. As I discussed before, we've got about 42 different sites that we did this drainage analysis on. So to do the drainage analysis, we have to do a couple of things. We have to determine the drainage area, and then we're going to calculate those peak flows to these areas. Once we calculate the peak flows, then we can analyze whether the infrastructure that's in place is either sufficient or it's not sufficient. If it's not sufficient, we develop a plan to make it sufficient. We either add inlets, increase pipe sizes, or improve grading to improve conveyance. And so here we've just got a quick example of, one of the pieces of the report. And so we've got these drainage areas that can be used in the future for anytime if these improvements are decided to move forward, we've got part of that work done for us. So in addition to that, we've got this concept level plan where we're saying, hey, this is where we should have a new double inlet, or we should have an increased pipe size here or there. So we're going to go from a 12-inch pipe to an 18-inch pipe. And so we've got these exhibits for every one of our 42 locations. So another piece of the plan was to provide a site classification. So what is a site classification? A site can either be classified as a public site, a private site, or a combination site, okay? So a public site would be a site that had capacity issues that were directly related to city infrastructure. Private sites would be things that happened, issues that happened due to private grading or privately owned infrastructure or HOAs. And a combination site would be the third one, which is a combination of those two things, right? So we've got a site classification for each one of our sites as well. And then we went into the construction cost estimating. And as we just heard earlier today, inflation is really out there. And what I would want to mention is that our construction cost estimates are in today's dollars. We use historic price data at a concept level design. We didn't go through a detailed design and do a topographic survey and pick out every slab of concrete that was coming out. We made generalizations, and we were able to come up with these concept level designs. Each one of our sites, our 42 sites altogether, we've got a total fix of about 6.1 million. They range from a couple of thousand to over 880,000. So each one of these sites, again, has the same unit prices with the exceptions of things like site restoration and traffic control and things that would be dependent upon the site. But when you look at the unit prices, they're comparing apples to apples throughout. All right, so the next step was to go through a priority ranking for each one of the sites. So our priority ranking looked at a couple of different things. What is the problem? If you've got structure damage, if you're having damage caused by these flooding events, you get a weighting factor of 30. If you've got property ponding where you just got some water in your yard, you get a weighting factor of 10, right? So beyond the priority rankings, we also have severity ranking. So we've already got 30 to 10 multipliers, but now we're also talking about how severe is the problem. Does that structure flooding get into my basement, or is it coming into the front room of my house. Those two things are separate and they're treated separately. Similarly, we have obstruction of traffic. Does the water get out into the road or is it into the gutters but stays in the gutters? Or is it out into traffic where we're impeding traffic, right? So we've got a number of different definitions on the screen, and we use this as part of our priority ranking. Other ranking items that we included in our stormwater ranking form, we talked about our weighting factors with the type of event, but we've also got the number of occurrences. Did this happen once over the last 5 years, or does this happen every week, right? And so the number of occurrences, we apply a factor there as well. We talked about our severity multipliers, and then we also look at a benefit multiplier, okay? So how many people does this improvement serve? And that's a big one, okay? And so if you got one house and you got water in your backyard, you're gonna fix it for one person, right? If you're gonna fix an entire street, everybody on that street's gonna have a benefit. So we multiply all of these different factors together and we come up with a priority ranking factor. That ranking factor is then divided by the cost for the improvement to come up with an efficiency rating, okay? And so that's what we've got. We've got a priority ranking, which is a really high number, and then we got a cost that's a divisor, and then we come up with our efficiency ranking. And then, so that's how we're using to rank each one of these things. So once we get all of these things put together, we went through all of the different steps, we went ahead and compiled our report. So on the screen, we've just got a couple of quick examples of the full report. Again, we got about 2 or 3 pages for each one of these different things, but what I wanted to provide is just kind of a quick synopsis of what's going on. For each one of the sites, we show whether it's a private site or a combination site or a public site. We give the priority ranking number right there. We give what the issues are. We give the observations that we observed during our field visits. And then we also provide a written description of the recommendations as well as those exhibits that we talked about earlier. And then we've got some nice pictures, right? So the pictures sometimes don't show the entire story because the pictures aren't taken at the times of the most extreme events, right? These aren't the times whenever it's flooding. We tried to get out there whenever the storm had happened or we could see some ponding or see some issues, but not all the times do the pictures represent what's going on, and other times they do, right? This particular one at 9429 Sonora, the problem is we've got water that sits on our driveway constantly. We took this picture about 3 hours after a rain event. I mean, and I think if you would come 2 days after a rain event, you would at least have the dirt and the mud there, depending on how hot of a day it was. So once we get through all of our report writing, the very last section in the report is the section that I think that everybody was looking for. It's the recommendation summary, okay? So we've got our 42 different sites, and we've got each one of these sites ranked, but we don't rank them apple to apples anymore. We did split these up into public sites versus combination sites versus private sites. We could add them into another chart if you wanted to rank them all together, but we've got a list here that's got all of our public sites ranked. I don't want to just stop on this too long. I wanted to provide this to you and have you look through it, and maybe we can come back to it here in a second, but we've also got all of the private sites ranked. Again, looking at the priority ranking number, the cost, and then provide that rank. And then we have our combination sites. We've just got a couple of combination sites. And so again, we've got all of these preliminary ranking numbers. And the public sites took the bag by a long shot with $5 million of the $6 million total of improvement cost, and just a couple of $100,000, $400,000 for the private sites, and $100,000 or so for the combination sites. So that's what I've been doing over the last 9 months, putting all of this information together. And that was the presentation that I had for you. I'm sure there's questions, so be glad to answer those for you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tony. And again, I just want to say I spent a lot of time reading through this and talking to residents. I was carving out the pieces for the people who live in my ward and taking it to their house, and they were all very appreciative and impressed by this. So, kudos for the work that you and your company did on this. Really impressive. So I'll open it up to questions from the board. No, yeah, Nancy.
I was waiting for the in-person people. So I had one just sort of technical question. One of the things you talked about in the report was capping the inlets. What does that mean?
Yeah, so a number of the sites that we investigated actually had some of the pipes blocked. And it was very odd to us. What's going on? Why are these pipes capped? Why are they blocked? And there was actually a project coming through with MSD that was going to make improvements here, and it wasn't here yet, right? And so I believe the problem is that they were experiencing a lot of combined sewer overflows, and people's basements and things were becoming damaged, and so it was easier to flood parts of the streets during these high flow events than to flood people's basements. And so there was actually different pieces that were capped. And so as we went through and started seeing this, we made contact with MSD and said, "What's going on here?" They go, "Oh, we've got what we call CSO Mary coming through, right?" And so there was a number of different sites that were directly related to that. Not all of the improvements that we were recommending were necessarily included in what they were doing. They're just trying to relieve the combined system. We've got ponding in these areas. Now we've got a place for the water to go. And so now we can combine teams with MSD to provide. And so on those types of sites where we've got CSO Mary, we assume that the relief sewer was already built, because to build a capital improvement project of that magnitude would make any one of these sites rank so far away from every of the other ones that it didn't make sense to us. So we said, if they're already going to plan this, how do we make our improvement connect into there? And that's the estimate that we provided. So good question, though.
Great, thank you. And so I'll sort of re-echo what Brandon said. This is amazing. When we decided to do this a number of months ago, this sort of is beyond my expectations of, I didn't really know what this would look like, but this is just a phenomenal, and the ranking and the detail that you gave to each particular site is really phenomenal. So these additional sites that you said there are additional sites that came up at the end. Are you going to add those in?
Well,
and then sort of a more longer term question for the city is, should this be sort of a living document, and every few years should we look at new sites that come up? So those are sort of two different questions and concepts.
yeah, so we looked at 42 sites, and that's how many sites that we said we would look at. So we'd be more than happy to look at some more sites for you, though.
And those are the 12 you mentioned, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So Nancy, I would propose we kind of table your one comment for the city, and then we'll get all our questions to Tony, and then we can talk about that.
Perfect. I'm good.
Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, I think you answered the efficiency question that I had. How do you got to that? So I'm assuming the lower the efficiency rating,
Yep, exactly. It's a golf score. So we've got here's the public ratings again. 10.81 is the lowest number there, and it's ranked number 1. Correct.
Okay. And then, for things that have, and just so I'm clear, for example, on Mary Avenue there, the ponding that sits in front of that house sits for several days after a rain event. Your calculation of how many people that affects, is it just the surrounding houses, or do you factor in the fact that, it's the entire neighborhood that then probably passes through?
Yeah, so
there?
that's a really great question too, and I didn't know how to attack it at first, but I wanted to be subjective as possible, and so I did only look at the houses that ponding was in front of. So Mary Avenue is down here ranked number 9. It's a fairly cheap fix at just under 70,000.
Right.
And, but it's only looking at four benefit factors. So, if you looked at everybody that drove down Mary, I'm sure it would shoot to the top of the list.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking, and I use that as an example that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's others examples, I mean, because,
Absolutely, and that's why I said we've got our draft ranking here. We could rank this, anybody could come through and say, this affects 700 people, or this affects only the
Right.
7 people.
Right.
And so it's a little bit subjective there, for sure.
understood. And then using that one as an example as well, because of the way that the water sort of pulls up, it goes into Rogers Parkway, which is not part of this. We didn't really talk about the park systems or anything like that, but it does go into, because we've cut some of the curbs there, and now it's eroding the park there.
Right?
I mean, are there other areas that those factors didn't really play in, and
Absolutely. Again, it's a rabbit hole that you could go down, and,
Right.
and how many things am I actually fixing? We didn't look at how many, of these other items we're actually fixing. We have a problem that was presented to us. How do I fix this problem? On Mary, it was, we have water sitting in the curb and gutter with nowhere for it to go. How do we fix that problem? That was the only thing that we looked at.
Understood.
For sure.
and then those 12 additional sites, I mean, I understand that you've not been scoped to really evaluate them, but just from plotting them, are they still within kind of the groupings, or are just tangentially, are we,
Yeah, so like I said, I got about 25 total responses, and I just looked at them, and some of them were directly related to an issue that we were already taking care
Okay.
of. That's why I went from 25 down to
Okay,
12.
understood.
And I would say that that's an approximate number. I didn't go into it in great detail, but it was obvious that at least 12 of them totally connected.
okay.
Any questions? Will the city have access to, we have your methodology, but like, I'm sure there's an Excel sheet or something that is calculating the priority in case we had something walk in and we wanted to just kind of see where it lays. Will we have access to that?
Sure, I can give you, right now you've got just the PDF version, but you're absolutely right. We have the priority ranking as an Excel sheet that we can provide to you. That's not a problem.
And you would keep all that stuff at Gonzalez in case we, if we do want to rehash this in the future, we can fold new sites in if we decide to do that, and you would have all that available, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Just curiosity, I'm really surprised when I'm looking at these maps that you have printed out and then also in there. I'm really surprised that we don't see more groupings or more issues that people brought up in the southern area of Brentwood near all the creeks that flood and everything else. Seems like they're mostly isolated up into Ward 1, which is interesting to me because it's, kind of higher elevation. You would seem like that would run downhill a little bit more. Just in curiosity, as you were going around, is that because we don't necessarily seem to have hydraulic problems in the southern sort of area of Ward 3, or is there just nobody filled out the form?
I don't think I could answer that question.
I've never been contacted.
We talked before the meeting started, correct? And you live over on Barnstable in Salem, right? The reason you probably weren't contacted because we did a preliminary site investigation, and it was obvious to us what the problem was. We had.
I'd like to know what the problem is.
Uh,
I've spent $20,000 since May getting water out of my home, and now it's moved out to my yard, and I have now gotten 12 mallard ducks have started living in my yard. So, and for Salem, there have never been, I've lived in my house for 57 years. There's no gutters. When we first
Roll this a little.
Yeah, I'm trying. So yeah, I appreciate your comments. So let's just kind of keep working this. And I think this kind of goes to the next topic we want to talk about is kind of like, how do we keep this going and how do we keep advancing it, right? This is not the end of the report in some respects, right? I mean, I think, Jeff, to your question, you know, we tried to get the word out to as many people as we could. Who knows how successful we were? I mean, I think a lot of people take this questionnaire about stormwater and probably just kind of tune out on it. And now that they can see what the end product is, I would hope that we can in some way keep that form around. In my mind, it's something similar almost to like traffic calming, where there is a form online, report a stormwater issue, that we would agree to some cadence of, you know, whether it's every year. Like this time seems perfect because every year we're going to have a certain amount of budget that we could, you know, get ready for next year and say we're potting 300,000 this year to start knocking down these priorities. And as new issues are showing up or additional research is necessary on things, we can just keep doing that almost like every year and just keep growing this thing. Yeah,
I
please.
totally agree. I think Dan and I discussed this, that part of the discussion ultimately, when the committee's ready, is to think about how we fund ongoing survey, update, and communication with the residents so that we can continue to explore different parcels, but then also, how do we fund it? And so there's the OMCI, and then there's grant money also out there. And I know I've shared that email as part of the ARPA with Tony, but then the city could also fund a certain percentage of that. So it's a combination of all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to be in the budget conversations that
Right.
we're going to start having here next
Right.
month, right? So, you know, I guess, is the committee agreed that we should continue to evolve this as we go forward as one of the next
I
steps?
definitely agree that I mean, this should be, to Alderwoman Tice's point, this should probably be a living, breathing document that, again, we wait till there's a little bit of critical mass of new information that comes in and then maybe engage Gonzalez for a evolution of this.
Right.
You know, and if projects between that point and the time that we re-engage have been decided that we're going to complete, then those obviously reshuffles some of the rankings, and maybe some of the new information changes the rankings. You know, it just seems like this can't be something that just sits on the shelf and for the next 10 years we try to tick down these things without augmenting it any, because it will change. Oh, Nancy's.
Yeah, Nancy.
So I know we don't really have the opportunity for participant comment now, but someone just asked a good question, which was, when is the report available online? And I know it's a very large document, so I guess maybe for BOLA, what attempts are we doing to get this out?
I'm going to have a discussion with Larry Covey to see whether we could shrink it in such a way so that we can upload it. It's a humongous document. I tried to email it even, it bounced back from certain.
Well, yeah, no, it's 118 megs, but
Megs,
I mean,
so-
if it's saved on one of our sites that's in the cloud, you can just create a share link that then is posted out there and people can view it, and it can change permissions to be view only, and you can actually restrict it to not be downloaded if you want it to be, but those are fairly easy.
That's what I intend the
easy
conversation
procedural
with
things.
with
Yep.
Larry.
Okay, so that'll happen,
Yeah.
so we can point people to it, because that would be nice. And then, I mean, so it sounds like the board's in agreement, I don't know if we need a motion or anything, but, you know, that we should start thinking about the constructs of how to keep this open, and what that looks like. And maybe that's a direction to staff of, you know, bring that back to us of, you know, is there a cadence? Is there a, you know, we would put this on the website and report a stormwater problem, click here, use the same survey, and then like July of next year or whatever, at some point, we would have, you know, Gonzalez or whoever we're using for on-call engineering services, which kind of goes to the point of like, would we be able to recreate that if Gonzalez is not the company that we use? Because we wouldn't want to use, not saying that would ever happen, but, you know, just in case, got to plan for the future. So I guess, would that be a good?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. I did have one quick follow-up question. In the report, you did talk about Rainscaping cost share programs. Are those Are those still, those aren't from the city of Brentwood, but they are from Missouri Botanical Gardens, is that right? Or is there?
There's a couple of different folks that provide those types of grant opportunities. MSD, depending on what watershed you're in, they provide those from time to time. And I don't have all of the details of that in my head right now, but that's something that is ever changing. What I provided was examples.
Okay.
And I think both of those opportunities have been expired, but that's a new thing that comes up every year, every other year that somebody has to kind of stay on top of, and that's kind of could be a part of that living document that we're talking about. So.
And just in your experience, are those only available to private homeowners who want to do something, or is that something that even if a Rainscaping garden in a public area would solve, at least mitigate some of the problems and might not be as expensive as some of the other solutions? Would they have a cost share with a municipality to?
Yeah, the opportunity that you shared with me, that's exactly what that is for the municipality.
Part of the ARPA grant.
Okay.
And then, as you said, Missouri Botanical Garden through the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance
Right.
also has a program. So if you think about Mount Calvary, the rain garden that they have in their rear lot was through a grant from Deer Creek Watershed. So every year, and I think this year, the deadline may have passed, but the percentage that they would contribute has gone up.
Oh, okay.
So it just depends on whether we need to promote it. And then those who have interest need to submit an application. And there's requirements for you have to attend this webinar and understand what the process involves. So we can continue to do that.
I think it's an important thing that we continue to communicate, and maybe it's also a SUSCOM, sustainability communications that can be done to promote that. It's another tool in the toolbox that can help.
Do we need a motion or anything on the, directing staff to go do that?
No.
Okay. So that's kind of the future of the stormwater plan, but what do we do with what has been presented to us tonight, right? So we now have a chalk line in time of here are the 42, should we talk about that? So, we have the OMCI funds this year, so there is potentially money that could, should we start executing on these? Should we, start going down the prioritization? Certainly, I would think, budget conversations when they start for next year would include this as well, but is there something that we should start doing now?
So Dan and I had this discussion. Dan, do you want to step up to the podium and you can talk about the finances, especially for the OMCI? And the money in the budget for this year, what we have allocated, what we've spent, what's left.
Yeah, if you recall the MSD OMCI funds, I believe they started in like 2019. So each year we collect around $125,000 to $130,000 per year from them. So it's basically sitting in an account, it's accrued. The first project that I got funding approval for was the master plan. So whenever we're kind of wrapping this up, then I'll put all those invoices together from Gonzalez and then turn it into MSD, and then we'll get reimbursed for the majority of this cost. So I guess long story short, there's money in there, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars. This I know costs over $100,000. So that money will be exhausted first. However, we've accrued for basically 3 years and not spent a dime. So I was kind of looking at the list and I thought, well, should we tackle some of the low hanging fruit, the least expensive cost options with the money we do have? Some of them are pretty far out of grasp. If it's $800,000, if it's $400,000, it could take you years to try to tackle that. So I don't know if Gonzalez has a priority on those or if it's probably up to us, and I know we still have, the whole discussion on debt payment and things of that nature when we go through our budget workshops. So once we figure out how much money's remaining, maybe we can carve out 5 or 6 projects at a time. And it depends on what you feel comfortable with on the timeline. Do we want to try to condense it down to 5 years or stretch it out over 15 or 20?
Yeah, Jeff?
Dan, are you in agreement with Gonzalez's ranking of these for the public sites? I mean, have you examined them and you feel like, yep, you would agree with the subjective,
Right.
some of the subjective things they've
Yeah, I
had.
looked at each page and the diagrams, and I was like, well, some of those, I know we've had complaints from folks that live on Lewis or, wherever the location is. And then I would look at the cost and how many people does it benefit? If it's a lot of cost, but maybe it fixes it for 8 homes, is that worth pursuing? Or do I do something that maybe only affects 8 homes as well, but it's only a $50,000 fix and I can get it tackled with this year's budget?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the ranking of the top 5 minus the one that's $480,000, I mean, theoretically, you could do most of that with OMCI
we
money.
could. And we would have to submit those. It's not like we would just start tackling it. We have
Yeah.
to go through the process like I did with this. There's a form you fill out, you turn it into MSD. I believe there's 4 deadlines in a year, like they're quarterly. So I can look and see when the next deadline is, talk to my counterpart at MSD and figure out which of these we would want to try to tackle and what do we need to submit.
I mean, if we need a motion, I would make a motion to direct staff to evaluate the ranking and OMCI funding and put together a proposal of, and a timeline, rough timeline of when to start the process.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I can just calculate how much we have in OMCI funds minus the cost to Gonzalez, what that balance is, and then what of that balance could be used to tackle how many of these?
Because obviously, these
Spreadsheet.
costs are your estimates, may
More,
be
yeah.
more, maybe less, whatever, right? I mean,
We would have to, and feel free to chime in, what would be the process to select the contractor to do the work?
Yeah, so again, what we have here is we have a concept level design. So a contractor will need detailed design plans still. So that's something that was not included. We've got pipe sizes, we've got inlet, number of inlets and things like that. But for a contractor, we're getting down to the every slab of concrete, every ton of asphalt that it takes to restore afterwards. So detailed design plans would be next on the list. We've done this for a couple of other communities, and what they felt like was the best course of action was to lump these projects together into bid packages. Instead of bidding out a $27,000 project, bid out the 27, 18, 49, and 36 together and get a pretty nice project, and you'll get a lot more contractor interest for a much bigger project as well. And it will save, if I'm doing a set of design plans and bidding documents, the bidding documents are the exact same for a 27,000 as it is for a 2.7 million. And so you'll get some benefit there on the design plans if you can do a bid package with multiple in there. So
and did your cost estimates include the design?
it did
proposal?
not.
Oh, okay.
It did not include the design, and it did not include any potential for easements, right? So some of these might be up against the right-of-way line. What kind of easements do we need? That part wasn't really evaluated with this either. So
Okay, so these costs will go up quite a bit.
So, question for you, Tony. Your current contract, since it does not include this, we could do a task order to include the authorization for you to start doing the design work, and that would factor into the list that we would bring back and what the true cost is. And then Dan would be able to say, this is how much we have left, and so we recommend maybe the first 4. Issue a bid packet for that. We can fund this, things like that.
yeah, and I could definitely work with Dan to come up, depending on which packages you pick, the design costs are going to be different. So I can work with Dan on coming up and narrowing that down.
So is the committee comfortable with the ranking?
Yeah, Jack.
So that's a question I wanted to ask Tony as well. So in terms of your ranking, and I'll echo what everyone else said, I very much appreciate this, far more detail than I think any of us could get through quickly. But I'm sure once this gets to the public, some people are not going to agree with the ranking, and I'm sure the city will be contacted and you'll be contacted and say, well, you didn't look at this information or you didn't look at this. Is that still within the scope, or these are the rankings that do you feel comfortable that you've looked at all the information? And
I looked at all the information that I had available to me. If there's new information brought to light, and some of the information is subjective in and of itself, because I'm relying on the public to say, oh, how many times did this happen over the last 5 years? It happens every day, okay? Well, I guess I'll give it the maximum score, right? So it's all subjective. And I use the information that I had available to me. So, yeah, the rankings could change depending on who did it.
And I guess that's a bit, are we gonna allow kind of, feedback to additionally have people, I want my ranking adjusted kind of thing? And I know we haven't decided, we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, but just,
I mean, I think, we're trying to put a single number and quantify very complex things that are not exactly measurable, right? And so you could spend an infinite amount of time like tweaking the stuff. And so, we had somebody who is unbiased in this, I would say, and they're professionals. And so I am very comfortable with this. I understand we could talk about it, we could, tweak it and everything. You just got to do something, right? This is a racking and stacking exercise. So I am personally very comfortable with it. And I think we should hold it. I mean, we're trying to put structure around this, and so instead of residents just calling us and saying my backyard's flooded, we now have a process. How do we decide to take action on that? How do we, entertain it? How do we prioritize it with other things that are going on? How do we measure it? And that's why I'm so excited about this, as well as one of the issues I think we have as a city is that we have a municipal memory that usually relies on people that have been working here or, elected officials for a while remembering that, hey, yeah, we did something like that 8 years ago. And this kind of gives us, if somebody calls about it, we can pull this up and say, oh, yeah, we looked at that. Here's the analysis. Here's the cause. And that gives us a lot of room. So I am personally very comfortable with the ranking. And, I will defend it, I think. So, Jeff, you had a motion, I think it was to basically I don't think we got a second on it, by the way, but.
No,
I'll second his motion.
Right. Can you restate that for Kelly?
well, I think it evolved a little bit based on what Bola was saying, because I kind of liked what she had to say. But, directing staff to evaluate the rankings and the funding that we have with OMCI. I think we also have to factor in real cost. So whether that requires a change order,
Right.
if Gonzalez says to do something else for more real costs, I think that's important.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of amend the motion to include that. And then put back a proposal to this committee of what projects we're going to bundle together to package and bid out.
So maybe what I'm hearing
Yeah, clean that up for me, will you?
is direction for staff to initiate a task order with Gonzalez for the detailed design plan.
Of the highest ranking, yeah.
Right, and I don't know what the cost would be. I'm sure it's maybe beyond my authorization.
Okay, well,
So
yeah, let's see
we
what that is.
would like to be able to, do you want to see that first before we automatically take it to the board? We can bring all of this back in August. How about that?
Okay, sounds good to me.
Okay, so
But that task order would be towards the first bundle of OMCI projects, basically.
yes. Yes.
Correct. And Nancy, are you still good with that?
Yeah, I'm still good with the second, and I think this is, I agree with Brandon. This is really a great list. It's somebody from the outside. It's not us with the largest, the biggest person who screams the loudest and us coming to bring it. We have someone from the outside who's unbiased bringing this to us, and I like the strategy of bundling these as Bola's amendment said, and moving forward.
Yeah, and I think this is the right way forward. I think we got to make sure that we don't continue to pick off the easy ones because they're smaller. There's some high priority ones on here that are large dollar values, and we can't, just because they're big, if they really are a higher priority, we gotta get to them at some point. And then I think we also need to be comfortable that some of these have, really, really high efficiencies, and, we'll probably never do them. So like, I don't think we should be broadcasting that we're gonna execute every one of these things. Especially if every year we're having new ones come in, then we should have some coming in at the top, and that we'll probably never finish this. So I don't think there's it's a 5 or a 15 year, it's just it's a rolling wave.
A question I have
You have a chance to talk at the end of the meeting, just to keep the meeting rolling.
has to do with the private site recommendations. So what exactly, Tony, are you recommending the city action be on private site?
So, as far as a recommendation on the private sites, again, the private sites, the improvement would be wholly on private property or within an HOA. What we've provided was recommendations to help these private individuals with their problem. I don't think I'm recommending that the city does anything, but just letting you know that here's a tool to fix your problem.
So the city's focus should be on public and combination. Is that accurate?
That, I feel like that's a city council question.
City council question. Okay.
Well, good, they have a meeting next week.
And I know we need to take a vote on the motion, right? I do think, though, it would be interesting when you asked about combining to that point, I think we kind of need to see what does the ranking look like when you fold in the combined sites with the public sites? Because those still have some public responsibility, city responsibility, right?
Well, and that's the reason that they're ranked privately. Something happened, you know, if one homeowner does something to another homeowner, does the city have responsibility, right? And so that's why they're ranked private.
Well, I'm talking about the combined sites.
Yeah, sure, the combined sites. Gotcha. Yeah.
But it seems like those ought to be at least in a separate chart. Where do those rank in the public-only projects?
And again, so again, as a definition of the combination sites, sometimes the combination sites, it's unclear who's responsible, right? So like the 9429 Sonora one that we've had as an example up here, you know, who caused this issue? Was it a resurfacing project within the city, or was it a poorly constructed driveway? You know, it's part on city property, it's part on private property. What's the true cause of, you know, the concrete that's not poured correctly right there? I don't know. I don't know when that concrete was poured. I don't know the history of it. That's why I had to rank that as a combination site.
So is it fair to say, though, you could look at the efficiency rating, so take the 8624 Eulalie that has an efficiency rating of 14.44. Is it fair to say that then that would put that, if you overlaid that with the public sites, that would actually put that as number 3 ranking
Correct, right.
in the list of things?
Yeah, it's you know, the priority ranking did not change whether it was for a private site or a public site or a combination site. What we found is that a lot of and even the private sites, we've got some private sites that help out a lot of people and they rank pretty highly, right? It's not just that I've got water in my backyard. There's 4 of us that has water in our backyards, right? And so it's sometimes, and in the combination sites, same way. It doesn't help just one person. You know, so it is all connected in some ways there as far as the ranking.
All right, so let's go back to the original motion, which is basically directing staff to do a task order, prepare the first slug. Any other comments? Let's get that off the table. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? All right, so we're making progress. That's good. I don't think we've answered, though, the private combination public thing. And honestly, I agree with your definition of private, but, you know, the highest rated one is 8 South Coat. And the reason that's private instead of combination, in my opinion, is because the road is owned by the HOA, but that's really kind of a neighborhood thing, right? I mean, if it wasn't owned by the HOA, that would be a combination.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, Jack.
I have an additional question on the private side. So you had mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like when I was looking through the private sites, a lot of those was, if I'm using the wrong terminology, but that overland flow. And you had mentioned that we don't have any ordinance, so to speak, in that. Is that something we should be discussing that would help the private sites?
Yeah, so a lot of the private sites would benefit from stormwater best management practices, right? And that's what the first, if you get into the report, I think it's the first 4 or 5, very detailed into that. And then again, we give a more general recommendation that it can be used not for just that, you know, we picked out one as an example. And then we can pass that out to everybody, giving the residents, again, a tool to help fix their own problems. I'm not sure that I answered your question, but the stormwater best management practices was a significant thing that we've seen throughout the city. And the overland flow issue definitely, it seemed like there was a lot of property ponding, I guess would be the word for it, on the private property. It's the water that's in my yard. How do you get the water out of my yard? And it's not so much the overland flow routes, but sometimes it's the neighbor that blocked the overland flow route because they didn't want to ditch through their yard. And so yes, having an ordinance in place, but I don't know how you grandfather that in at this point. You maintain it moving forwards, right, because you have the site plans that indicate where those overland flow routes are at, so.
Actually, I have a follow-up. I'm glad, Jack, you mentioned that. So on the areas that you talked about, there's deficiency in maybe the procedure in our ordinance. Is that something, maybe this is a question for
Yes.
Bola, is that something that we need to then make a motion to amend ordinances to make sure that we're fixing some of those things, or?
It might be multiple task orders. So for the first part that there was a motion on, then there's a second task order that will help the city to draft a new ordinance and all those other things he said at the beginning.
Okay.
So we can bring those back August. I think those are simple. Okay.
Do you need a motion to that effect? Okay, make a motion that we issue another task order for fixing ordinance language.
Second.
And would that include the overland or a concept of
So it
that?
would include the overland, it would include the fee structure in MyGov. It would ensure that the flow chart that they shared with us is all uploaded to the website. So it's a combination of those 3 or 4 items that he mentioned at the beginning. And also the opportunity for residents to continue to provide us updates and to bring that back to this committee maybe July every year. So it's all rolled up together in that one motion.
Okay,
Sounds great.
all right. Any other comments or questions on that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
All right,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay. I don't think we have the private-public combination thing
Yeah.
answered, and maybe we don't answer that at this meeting. I guess the task order, they're gonna bundle something together, right? And it'll be based on your expertise and the prioritization, and it sounds like we're gonna have to keep talking about that.
Right.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board on this? Again, I love this thing. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we'll move into citizen comment, item 10A. So this is an opportunity, if you'd like to speak, feel free to come up. Just tell us your name and your address.
Jeannie Suntrup, 8710 Bridgeport. Now, what is going on with Eulalie and, not Eulalie, Rosalie and White? What's going on with them? And then you're going to move up to Bridgeport?
Yeah, I can happily give you after the meeting what
Oh.
that's an MSD Project Clear project. That's what that's all about.
So then I was thinking, if you're going to do Bridgeport, why don't you just add that in, the problem that I have with my house?
I'm happy to talk with you afterwards
Okay.
about that.
And then the other thing I wanted to say was, a couple years ago, there was problems on Cecilia, where they were having a lot of flooding in their basements. So that might be the reason why there's not so many reports. The problem's already been taken care of. But I'll talk to you after, Brandon.
Thank you. Yeah, come on up.
Hi, my name is Beth Ford. I live at 2468 Salem and Barnstable Court. Recently, what happened this April, I moved some of the shelving that was in my garage. I have a underground, or under the basement, under the house. And my outside wall was very pregnant. It was just really bad, and I had a crack about yay high. And I was getting, I had a sump pump. Paul Hampel Sr. Put in that sump pump back in '95, okay? And so I had a company come, and they rebuilt the wall from, they took everything away and rebuilt it, put a new, bigger sump pump in. So I haven't had any problem in the garage. Then all of a sudden, within 2 weeks, when I would go downstairs to do the laundry, I kept hearing like a babbling brook, and I couldn't figure out what it was because I have carpet on the floor. And then I walked around and how wet it was. And I've had water problems since they resurfaced our Salem Road and all the little cul-de-sacs back in '94. January of '95, February, and March, I had 3 inches of water in my basement. And they all said, I had MSD, I had the water company, I even had Brentwood come and check. And the water company brought blueprints of the area, and they said that because we're built on top of Berry Cave, that we have underground springs. Well, when they resurfaced the street, somehow or another, that big equipment moved the spring, and it's under my house now. So I just had my basement waterproofed and a new sump pump put there. I've spent $20,000 already of my own money. And now they put the water release out in my yard. And it's unbelievable, the amount of water that's coming. And I'm afraid all that water is going to go back into under my house again. So, and I had the people who did my inside work and the wall come last Monday, and he looked at it. He couldn't believe the amount of water that has sprung up. It's spring water. It's not anybody else's water. And so there's so much water now in my side yard that I've inherited some ducks. And I got to get, I had them come out, and I said, maybe we need to put this release thing out further, but it's going to run out in the street. I don't know what to do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Anyone else?
There's no one online.
Were there any comments in the chat that need to be public record or anything?
Yeah, let's see. So there's a question about putting it online, so we're going to do that. Comments. Okay. Oh, there's more.
Okay.
Okay. All right. All right. Any other citizen comment? Okay, great. Seeing no new business in front of the board, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Bye all.